filled with channels with millions of subscribers that you have never heard about. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing because it means there's space. Like, just, I mean, come on, look at like the feature creator list at VidCon. Like, most people are like, who are these? But that's not a bad thing. It's because each one of them represent like the best in a very specific community. It's like humanly impossible to be part of all of those communities. Same thing when you, like one of the programs among the many problems that YouTube Rewind has is that they try to make a snapshot that represents YouTube for like the highest amount of people as possible. But if you have been following YouTube for years, you probably have noticed that how it's harder and harder every year to recognize people in YouTube Rewinds because there's no like general YouTube to make reference to. So, and now it's a good point to introduce myself. So why do I care about this stuff so much? So, hi, my name is Alex. I'm better known online as the Lowspec Gamer. I have a channel dedicated to the budget side of PC gaming. I modify the graphics of PC games to make them work on low-end PCs. I review and push low-end hardware to its absolute limit. And the reason why I started my channel was because I was personally frustrated about how there was all the focus on all the big gaming channels wasn't like the super high-end, super expensive stuff. And that I felt that didn't represent my interests or the interests of a lot of people that try to follow content online. And I thought there might be like a space there to be different and to experiment. And it worked. And the good news about this is that what I did wasn't particularly special. It simply worked because there was an unidentified need for a certain side of the discussion that was simply not being met. And when I did this presentation, I originally did the slides for VidCon London, so that's like 3 or 4 months ago. And ever since then, like yesterday I reached 600,000 subscribers, so it's still growing. It's still a thing that is happening. And I'm not special in that sense. Niches themselves are not special. Like YouTube has always been the weird platform for things like channels that review claw games or like review elevators. Like this thing has existed for a long time. It's just that YouTube right now is big enough and has so much critical mass that it has become easier to just be sustainable doing that alone. So as competition increases, it is more and more important that you find your specific niche to work with. But okay, where do we start? How do I find a niche? First thing, we tend to think of niches purely as topics to engage with. This is a mistake. Niches are people. Niches are communities interested in specific things. You're not creating videos for the sake of videos. You're creating content for people. So you have to keep in mind when you're looking for a niche, not, okay, what's the topic that I need to engage with, is what's the community that I need to talk with. So this is a question that comes very often, like in VidCon panels, and it drives me insane because it's not fantastical advice. But there's a really practical reason for making this question of what you're passionate about, and the reason why that is a good question is because we are all better at identifying needs and niches in communities that we're already a part of. Like, take back to the example of my channel and how I created it. I consume a lot of gaming content, and I consume a lot of tech and a lot of PC gaming content. And I constantly have this pain that the part of the process that I was more interested in, that was more relevant to my personal experience, no one was talking about it. And as I talked to other people, I realized that more and more people were like, yeah, why is no one talking about this? You are more likely to notice a niche that is underexploited if you are part of it. Another important one is language. A large part of YouTube is not in English. And I live in Spain and I know a lot of people in the Spanish gaming, and the Spanish YouTube community in general. And it's always surprising to me how you can grab certain topics that are completely already oversaturated in English-speaking YouTube and do basically the same thing in a different language, and there's not just as much competition, so it's able to flourish. Minecraft, I think, is an excellent example. Like, Minecraft saturated the English-speaking markets years ago, and yet it's something that is finding way more growth in a lot of older languages simply because it had not sort of catched up. So if you are bilingual, if English is not your first language, or if you have a second language, this is something worth exploring as a tool for finding an audience. And to me, the most effective way of doing some research and see if there's a potential niche are these two ideas. The first is if you do research for a topic, and there's already people making videos for it, but the videos are like bad quality, but have decent amount of views with low level of engagement so okay views, people are finding them or being recommended it because the topic is interesting to them, but the likes and dislikes are very low. It's not like it has a lot of dislikes, it's just that people are not clicking on any of the two or has very low numbers of comments. Those are usually a sign that people are searching for the topic, but are not being satisfied by what they find. And the other, which I think is very important, is like target, if a set of an audience feels misunderstood by the wider community, that is usually a sign that there's a niche there that is not being discussed. In my case, in the case of PC gaming, it was, sadly still is pretty common that when people try to discuss strategies for playing games on cheaper computers, in places like Steam forums or Twitter or Reddit even sometimes, a lot of people are like, what are you doing? Just get a job and buy a real PC. And this, as irritating as it is, this is like people tend to look for spaces where they can feel understood. And when large communities constantly run into this sort of misunderstanding, this lack of empathy, it sort of means that there's an opportunity to create that space to have that discussion. Is there a pain in a community that you're a part of that you can alleviate? Is there, if you are part of a community or you engage in a lot of a certain discussion of some videos, and you constantly feel like, wow, everyone is talking always the same points of view. Like I always hear these 2 or 3 things in this community over and over again. Why is no one talking about this other side of it? That's usually a sign that there's a place there for you to compete. Is there a value that you can provide to that community that is not being provided by the mainstream members of that community? Something that I say that is the superpower of anyone that is starting a YouTube channel today is the fact that they're going to have wildly different and sometimes better perspective than people that have been doing this for a while. And this is a problem that I run into myself very often. Like the more you spend surrounded by people in a specific community, the more you can sort of end up tuning your opinions around them, and you can lose a lot of interesting discussions that are happening. They're just not making themselves up the chain. So use your perspective. Use the perspective that you have that bigger creators don't have in order to focus. Okay, so let's say that talk helped in something and you have a niche in mind, or you find this niche and you're like, okay, I got my idea, I know what sort of pain I can alleviate, I know what I can value and what community I can target. How do I get any traction in this freaking platform where there's so many competition? So let's talk about that. So the first is, let's talk a little bit about the algorithm. If you do your work correctly, the algorithm, which we usually talk about it in negative terms, can be extremely useful. And the reason why it can do a lot of the work for you, this is one of the very few papers that YouTube has published regarding how its recommendation algorithm works. I'm not sure if I recommend reading it because I had to look for several specialists like in neural networks just to explain the basics of whatever the heck it's being talked here. It's dense. But there was one part in particular that actually caught my eye, which is when YouTube is deciding what to recommend, they pass through several filters where they input different variables. And what you have watched in the past is one of them, but there's this thing called collaborative filtering, which I think is fascinating. YouTube uses the input of other people like you with similar demographics as you and similar topics of interest as you to see what else it can recommend to you. And recently they have started doing this way more transparently, because I don't know if you have noticed, like in mobile, but occasionally you get a prompt being like, people who watch this channel that you just watched also watch, and it shows you something completely different. That is collaborative filtering. Like it's using the data of the people already watching a channel to be like, oh, who else is similar to this that we can recommend it to? And that means that if you get your target interest and target niche demographic in line and you get some of them to start watching your videos, YouTube can do a lot of the work of finding those people, whatever they are, and making them join your community. So how do you target, when you're starting from zero, how do you target to make sure that, because this is not about getting lots of views, it's about getting the right people watching your videos that can trigger the algorithm to find similar people. How do you get those? So a lot of this comes down to packaging. There's a lot of discussion of how to do proper thumbnailing, and it's like people don't think enough about the thumbnails. Everyone, including myself, should be thinking more about their thumbnails. But one thing that I think needs to be approached correctly is that often when we talk about thumbnails or we talk about clickbait, it's always, how do I shock my viewers into clicking this video? How do I make something shocking or like colorful that it stimulates them to click? And I think the correct question should be, how do I communicate what my video is about? I think we often forget that when someone's approaching one of our videos for the first time, like they have zero context, especially if they have never heard of a channel before. And that means that your thumbnail, and also your title, but mainly the thumbnail, needs to communicate to them what's the tone of your video, what's the audience target of the video, what are you meaning to explain? Look at it this way. These are all stuff like designers study. So if you have a background in design, you're likely you can ignore me because you probably know this better than I do. But if you're not a designer like myself, it's a good exercise to do the thing that I had to do for my entire channel, which is take a home screen, take a snapshot of your home screen, and see the thumbnails that grab your attention. Do not click on them, do not watch the video, and write, okay, try to guess as much information from that video as possible based on the thumbnail. Is it going to be funny? Is it going to be informative? Is it going to be interesting? Or is it going to be more serious? Like, try to see what the thumbnail is communicating from the actual video, and then you click on them and you see how well or bad they were communicating that, and see how you could learn from that. Like, if you look at the Real Engineering Machine Learning versus Cancer thumbnail, like the colors, the type of font that is being used, it gives you this idea of something very serious, very sciencey. If you look at the thumbnail all the way to the other side, you know it's something that's going to be funny. And not even like funny, like a very specific type of humor. I mean, we haven't watched these videos. We're guessing that entirely based on the thumbnail. So you should put your own thumbnails to this exact process, because you need to communicate very quickly and very effectively what's your niche and what's your target audience based on your thumbnail. So it's not about getting as many people as possible to click on it, it's about getting the right people that you need in your niche audience to click on those. I think it's better to have a smaller audience but better focused than just larger traffic, because that way whatever YouTube becomes like much more precise on its recommendations, and you can get to that specific people in your niche much faster. Let's talk a little bit about external traffic, because a lot of people get their first like spike in views and subscriptions based on being shared on some external site. And external sites have classifications as well. Like there's external sites for niches specifically. And it's also a matter of trying to figure out what are the specific sites or the specific places where people in your niche, the niche you're trying to hunt for, usually gather and have discussions for. My favorite example for this is Reddit, because Reddit follows this exact philosophy. For every gigantic, disorganized, hellish subreddit that is discussing on a specific topic, there's like a collection of smaller ones that are for something more niche and more specific. And that gives you an opportunity to participate in the discussion or observe the discussion for a more specific topic. This doesn't, like what I'm trying to say partially about this is, for example, if you use Reddit as a way to see if you can share your content and get some of the initial traction, for the love of everything, stop trying to get the first post on a big default subreddit. Like you're competing with every YouTuber out there. It seems to me so many people that I've encountered seem to be that their dream is to hit the main video subreddit /r videos. And it's like you're competing with every YouTuber out there. Like that's insane. That's a super generalized audience. Find the subreddit that is more relevant to your niche, trying to learn from that community and trying to find people there. Also, don't shamelessly self-promote because Reddit has a culture against that, and there's tons of shameless self-promoting on Reddit, usually done by marketing agencies that are very good at hiding it. If you have experience in marketing and work in these agencies, feel free to capitalize on that. If not, don't try it. I say that by experience. They will not be kind to you. But they're communities, and that means learn from that community, learn from what it has to say, learn what they value. Like Reddit is a fantastic research area, because if you have this idea, okay, I want to enter into this niche because I don't see this side of the conversation being represented. Where can I go on Reddit that allows me to research this, that allows me to research and see if this feeling that I'm getting that there's a place here for a discussion could happen. And you can use that subreddit as a testing ground. It's a fantastic testing ground. Okay, let's talk about sustainability, because usually when I talk about all these niches, a lot of people always tell me like, oh yeah, but you want to get as much views as possible, otherwise you are not being able to survive economically. So the real question is, can you make money being niche? So this should not be only for niches, but this goes double for niche channels. Do not rely on AdSense. AdSense, you get demonetized, the CPM changes. I mean, have you noticed how even most bigger YouTubers nowadays have so many sponsors? Like it's an unreliable, AdSense is not a good strategic decision to rely on, which is also why YouTube is also introducing so many alternate monetization tools. So sometimes you can luck out because the prices for ads in AdSense depend a lot on the target audience. And that means that sometimes you can be like the one channel that decided to make videos on the niche of real estate, for example. And turns out real estate ads cost a fortune. So you have 10,000 subscribers and you're making tons of money because you're like the only person making videos on that topic, so your old ads be served there. That can happen, but that is extremely difficult to predict because it's very difficult to know beforehand, like the CPM for those specific audiences in those niches. So don't rely too much on that. YouTube is introducing a lot of alternate tools. The best thing that I have to say about that is like, don't try to use them all. I see too many people who like enable all the monetization tools and hope something works. Each tool is useful for a specific type of content and a specific type of audience. Experiment and try to see from pure logic which one fits with the niche and type of content that you want to do. But my favorite topic of discussion is brand deals, because a lot of people have the, I guess, false view that when you approach a brand, it's like, oh, they're going to be interested because I can make a video that has 1 million views. But brands have target audiences too. If you have ever worked in marketing, you're going to know that brands don't market to everyone, they market to specific groups of people. And that means that often they're going to care more about having access to the specific group of people rather than big quantities. Like I have talked to brands that care way more about working with a channel with 100,000 subscribers, but specifically in the topic that that brand is about, rather than working with a comedy channel with 1 million subscribers. Because to them, those 100,000 people are highly targeted and are way more valuable to them. This is going to take some detective work in your part. If your desire is to go full-time and become a professional YouTuber, the one part that I think is poorly talked about is that you have to become your own sales department for a while. And that means that you have to start researching brands, brands don't usually publish like, oh, this is our target audience. But you can figure it out pretty easily by seeing their marketing. You can see sort of the age of the people they put in their marketing, their values that they usually represent in your marketing. It's surprisingly easy to reverse engineer what people they are actually aiming for and where their priorities are. And you have to spend, once you have a certain amount of momentum, you have to spend some time looking for what brands fit better in the niche audience that you're trying to reach. Because if you can find that perfect marriage, like you can end up with a brand that you can work with for years. So yeah, you're gonna have to do that detective work. It's work, but it's once you start getting that momentum, it becomes way easier. And this is one part of the YouTube work that very few people talk about. But if you want to achieve sustainability, it's extremely important. There's also what I call unconventional monetization. Like when you look articles or talks about how to monetize content, you usually more or less run into the same things. There's merch, there's Patreon, there's AdSense, there's brands. But a lot of people that I know that have been extremely successful in niches are because they have managed to find unconventional ways of monetizing their expertise. To put an example, I met years ago a guy who had, it was a channel about dating, but dating through self-improvement. So the idea was how to, it was sort of dressed as how to date better, but in reality it was about how to self-improve so you can get to that point. And this guy who was being really successful, a lot of his money came from the fact that he will do like personal coaching through the channel. So people from the channel will reach to him directly and he will like charge by the hour. Or I know people that do videos about legal, they're lawyers and they explain important legal cases of drama that is happening in YouTube who also use that to promote their own legal services. Like I remember there was a guy that had a very small channel on real estate, but was like the guy that had the channel about real estate. So everyone would reach him out to like do consulting on real estate, and that's unconventional monetization. I run into something similar myself, like since I put so much work into being the guy that is talking about this low-end gaming topics. Tom's Hardware is a pretty big hardware reviewing website. And they contacted me because they needed a specialist to write articles and features regarding the low-end gaming. And when you look up low-end gaming online, usually my stuff is the first one to pop up. And this has been something, this has been a beautiful partnership that I've had with them. I've been able to attend events and experiment with hardware and write some really cool stuff. And they want me to do it as my brand. Like I signed those features as Low Spec Gamer because that is what sort of makes the specialty of it. And their help has actually helped me a lot during moments like the apocalypse. So this sort of alternative monetization, like remember, when you're focusing on a niche, you're basically becoming a specialist. And being a specialist, if you know where to put your specialty, can be extremely useful. A topic that people usually ask me about is, yeah, but aren't you going to get like trapped in a specific niche? Like, isn't this going to be a problem? And my take on this is that you can diversify if you do it very slowly. Like, if you have a channel about cars and one day you start uploading videos about vacuum cleaners, like obviously everyone's gonna be like, why? But if you find ways of bridging topics slowly over several videos, you can extend the range of things that you talk about. The real question there is, remember what I said at the start, like niches aren't topics, they're people. So ask yourself, for the specific niche that you're thinking about targeting, what other topics are they interested about? Like what other stuff is relevant to that specific group of people? And usually those represent opportunities for branching out. Like when I started, I did videos specifically about the games, about the specific games and how to tweak them for low-end PCs. But slowly I started experimenting with low-end hardware, with low-end reviews. I need to update this slide because recently I started doing videos about virtual reality on the budget side. Or I work with the Raspberry Pi Foundation and a set of videos on gaming on Raspberry Pi. So if you find other topics that your specific niche audience is interested in, you can slowly transition and branch out. But don't make the mistake of starting too general. The magic of being niche is that you can compete when you're very small. Something that I have discovered now that I'm reaching over 500,000 subscribers is that it's way easier for me to engage on bigger topics that I would never have approached before simply because I have momentum. But what I mean by that is use the niche fact, to be able to compete when you're small, and as you grow, you can open up and engage on bigger topics. But when you're small, the real problem is visibility, and being niche actually helps you focus on that. Another thing that is important to keep in mind, as niches grow, they stop becoming niches and they fragment. ASMR is my favorite example of that. I started consuming ASMR content very early on this trend, and it has been bizarre to see how it has transformed into a mainstream thing. But as it has, before, if you were doing an ASMR video, you were one of the very few people doing so, and therefore you will get traffic from that. Nowadays, starting a general ASMR channel is difficult because everyone is doing so. But ASMR has grown so big that now it's fragmenting, and now I see more smaller ASMR channels that are finding success by focusing on specific triggers. And this is the same thing that happened for video games. For a time, making videos about video games was in itself a niche. But then it grew so much that it's like, oh, I don't do videos about video games. I do videos about this specific game. Or I do videos about this specific franchise. Or I do videos about this specific genre. And this happens to all niches. As all niches grow, they will fragment into smaller niches. And that means that it creates new opportunities. Like, you're never going to run out of niches. As things grow, it will simply fragment and create new pockets where you can find a place and compete. Here's an example. I have given you some of the tools that I use to identify what's a niche content to engage with. And here's an example of when I made an assessment that was actually very useful. During the Fortnite, the start of the Fortnite craze, I did a video on Fortnite that did a couple that did pretty well, but then they updated the game and pretty much banned and blocked everything that I could do on it. Yeah, someone in Epic apparently doesn't really like me. And this was like when everyone couldn't talk of anything but Fortnite. So I started looking for all the alternative topics, and I discovered something very interesting. Most people think in this side of the world, think of PUBG as a PC game, but the mobile version of PUBG is extremely popular in the countries where Fortnite is not popular. And yeah, Fortnite is a very localized phenomenon. Like, Fortnite is popular in Europe and North America, mainly. That's where it's like super mainstream. On places like Asia and the Middle East, that's really sticking. And when you see the YouTube reports of what's the biggest games on the platform, Fortnite is usually second, because Minecraft is a global phenomenon. So it has that complete global audience. And with PUBG Mobile, I kept seeing these articles about how it kept getting banned. You will see articles like, oh, PUBG is getting banned in all these different Middle Eastern countries. But if you actually read the article, it's not like PUBG PC, it's like PUBG Mobile specifically, the one causing the problem. And I mean, you know something, a video game is popular when religious groups are trying to ban it. And that made me interested in exploring if I could talk about this topic. And I started doing so, and surprisingly, I started gaining a very strong following in a lot of these countries unexpectedly. So that was the same example of a niche. This is an interesting slide to me, not only because when people usually tell me like, PUBG Mobile, like a mobile game, like who plays that seriously? There's like a freaking esports league in Dubai for PUBG Mobile. There's like professional players for this thing. And it has its own YouTube community that is growing extremely fast that most of you probably have never heard about. I did this slide in VidCon London 3 or 4 months ago, and I have found this channel called Panda that did exclusively videos on PUBG Mobile, and that in the space of like 6 or 7 months had accumulated like 750,000 subscribers. I had not updated this, and I just checked on my phone. That was 4 months ago. He now has 3.3 million. And he does only videos on PUBG Mobile. So my point, like, when you look at the discussion of mobile gaming on this side of the world, there's a lot of this idea of, it's casuals, it's ruining gaming, mobile gaming is here to take everything from us. Remember how I said that you can identify a niche because sort of the larger community tends to be like aggressive towards them, like they tend to feel misunderstood? So this had like all the signs of a potentially exploitable niche. And what I mean by that is not like I don't want you to walk out of the presentation being like, oh, I have to do videos about PUBG Mobile. PUBG Mobile is an example. It just has all the conditions that I sort of pointed out for a niche. And there's like millions of this example out there. Like I keep running people into people in Bitcoin. Someone yesterday pointed me out like, oh, that guy, yeah, he's pretty famous in Thomas Tube. And I'm like, Thomas Tube? Oh yeah, the people who do videos about Thomas the Tank Engine. What? So yeah, it's impossible to understand all the niches out there. And there's always going to be space for you if you know where to find them. Thank you. Thank you. If you have any questions, I don't know, I think we still have time. So there's a microphone right there, and I will try to answer as many as I can. If there's, I will wait like a few minutes to see if anyone wants to make a question. Otherwise, thank you for coming to this presentation. This has been very, oh, someone's asked a question? So how do you boil down a niche from like a bigger thing? Usually through research of what the discussion is currently. If you look at something like gaming, you naturally see that all the people that belong to the gaming area are all talking about different things. This is why tools like Reddit are super useful. It's a matter of going to social media, so going through Reddit, through going to the places where people are talking about the topic and seeing how the conversation naturally fragment. If you sit at a table with 10 people that all play video games, naturally they will like divide in 3 groups and talk about 3 different games. And you need to observe that, but in like on a larger scale.
Hi, my name is Jovi. I do videos about celebrity news, but not more about Black female empowerment and what could we learn through what's going on with the celebrities. So my thing is sometimes I get confused. I'm like, celebrity news is such a big, you know,
Yes,
big arena, and I'm doing okay in there, but like it's really to me about the Black female empowerment and how to like improve as a culture. So I'm trying to like figure out my niche,
right,
specifically on like where I should really focus.
So the advantage there, to me, it sounds like you have a very clear idea of what's the niche that you want to find there, in terms of people, because your niche is the people who follow the celebrities, the people that want to be identified by these celebrities. So I think the key there will be there's got to be like a very specific group of celebrities that these people want to talk about. It's going to be impossible to talk about all of them, even within your niche. So experiment with different names and try, like the thing about celebrities that is useful is that celebrity names are keywords. So it's very easy for the algorithm to sort them. So it will be a matter of figuring out which are the 2 or 3 key celebrities that are going to get the most interest initially, and focusing on those at least until you grow enough that you can focus on expanding more.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Hello. My question is, if you have like a specific niche and you feel like you've covered just about like every topic possible for that like certain topic, and you feel like your content kind of just like plateaus after a while, what do you do to like branch off from there where your content is still related to like your community and your specific niche?
Well, one, it depends on how big the existing audience is. If it's small, you can pivot really easily, almost like without transition. If it's larger and you're afraid of having some level of backlash, you have to find what I call parallel topics. So in my case specifically, cloud gaming isn't exactly connected to what I do, but because the people that I do are very cost sensitive, they were naturally going to be curious about, oh, you know, will cloud gaming make it cheaper for me to game? And that means that when I started experimenting with it, I started seeing like more and more people were responding to it. So now, like, some people ask for my opinions. I'm one of the cloud gaming guys, but that was simply that was a topic that was simply parallel to what I was doing. So what you need to do is find those parallel topics. So it's experimenting a little bit to trying to figure out what other things within the niche that you have already sort of exhausted are also interesting to those people.
Oh,
Thank you so much for a great presentation. Do you have any comments to make about collaborating with creators that address the same niche, which you may not have experience with, but if you have any comments, please.
Yeah, I do have some experience. The good thing about collaboration is that it's not a zero-sum game. Like one of the, and I can say this with experience, one of the worst things about being on a niche on your own is that you